Hello, my name is Nathaniel Abbott with Unique Realty Solutions, and this is my free video on lease options and are they the right choice for buyers. First, let's start off with the definition of lease options. A lease option is really two things, a lease and a purchase option. A lease is a contract for the use and possession of land, creating a landlord-tenant or a lessor-lessee relationship. A purchase option is a unilateral agreement wherein the optioner, the seller, agrees to give the optionee, the buyer, the exclusive right to purchase the leased premises. The option price is generally set at a fixed price at the inception of the lease, although it does not have to be. At any time during the option period, which generally corresponds to the lease period, the tenant can exercise his or her option to purchase. An option is not the same as a regular purchase contract, which is a bilateral agreement. A bilateral contract legally binds both parties to the agreement, whereas an option only binds the seller. An optionee is not bound by it. It is his or her option to do so or not to do so. A lease out with an option arrangement is not a sale, but rather a landlord-tenant relationship. In rare cases, a court may recharacterize the transaction as a sale if it looks like a sale. Furthermore, the IRS does not classify a lease option as a sale until the option is exercised. Now let's look at the advantages of a lease option for tenant buyers. The one main advantage is that a tenant buyer can gain equity by locking in a price today. A locked-in price with the addition of appreciation can really leave a lot of equity for a tenant buyer years later. And investor buyers could put an unlimited amount of lease options under contract in theory. The buyer does not have to follow through on the property and exercise the option if they choose not to. If the buyer feels the house is not right, or it has gone down in value or not up in value at all, the buyer can choose not to record the option. This is a huge advantage for the buyer. The buyer may also build equity through monthly rental credits if the seller and buyer agree to do so. The way this would work is that a portion of the monthly rent could go as a credit towards the purchase of the property. Lower the property price by X amount per month, and at the time of the purchase agreement could be agreed on at the lower price. This gives the tenant buyer a chance to build in extra equity in addition to their option money. If the lease allows subletting, the tenant buyer could allow for some help from other tenants or roommates to help pay for things. Lease options are great for buyers and allows them to control one or many properties for a fairly affordable price. Most lease option properties are in pretty good condition, so this is a great concept. Most lease options allow 1 to 3 years to allow for the tenant buyer to increase their credit score so that when it is time to finance, they can get financing and at a much more competitive interest rate. Now we're going to look at the disadvantages of a lease option for a tenant buyer. And the one main one is that a landlord can still evict you if you do not make your payments. And evictions do not take that long. If a tenant buyer has more money to put down, they may want to do a contract for deed, where the cancellation process is a lot longer than an eviction. Tenant buyers have to put down option money, which is almost always non-refundable. As another negotiable item, landlords may not count option money towards the purchase price, or may not give rental credits. The tenant is able to at least try to negotiate this with the seller though. Tenants still have to consider that when they make payments to the seller, they have to have checks and balances in place to make sure that the seller is making those payments to the bank. Sellers have been known to not do this and keep the money for themselves and let the house go into foreclosure. But this is true of any rental situation. Tenant buyers just need to do double checks with the landlord/seller. Tenants put down option money, and if they don't work really hard on their credit score to improve it, they may not be able to get financing in the near future. Another disadvantage for tenant buyers is that based on some situations with their previous house, whether it was a short sale or a full foreclosure, they may not be able to get financing for quite a few years, and the lease option may have been written for far too short of a period of time, when they needed longer to allow for financing and the foreclosures to come off of their record, credit report, or not to disqualify them for financing. And another disadvantage for tenant buyers is that if they have very little option money, they may have very limited choices on which houses to choose from. If they have less than $3,000 to $4,000 in option money, they may have to go search and find sellers themselves. They maybe can't work with an agent since there is not enough money for an agent to be paid on the transaction. The possible biggest concern for a tenant buyer on a lease option is at the time of closing, they still have to be concerned about the title work on the property. And what I mean by this is, who are all the sellers? Are they around to sign as sellers on the property? Has anyone been recently divorced or deceased? Is there a need for power of attorney? Are the sellers in other countries? Will the sellers participate when the time comes? Basically, what you want to do is learn to get to know your sellers, trust them, and become good friends with your sellers. Basically, learn to get to know your seller, trust them, and become good friends. If you do this, you should have no problem having your lease options go smoothly.